You are live. All right. Now is it on Twitter? Let's see. Oh, cool. It is.
Oh,
I think.
on your account?
Yep. Oh, look at that. Son of a gun. Yeah.
Oh, let's go. I'll retweet it.
Okay. Let me send it to you.
I got it.
Oh, okay.
Live with Bucky J.
All right. All right. All right. Hello, Stephen. Can you see the comments or no?
Me? Let
Yeah.
me see. Comments. Yes, I can.
Okay.
Join the chat. Okay. Because I can't unless I connect to YouTube.
Oh, okay. Let me make sure it's on the YouTube as well before we get going here. What a boomer. Oh, yeah, it is. Okay. Okay. So what the heck's going on in Pennsylvania is the obvious question. Sounds like you and Amy have been all over this morning.
Yeah.
What county are you in? Because a lot of us everywhere talks about counties. We don't so much in Texas. So it's a little different. Where are you at? Where's this all happening, etc.?
Yeah. So I'm in Cambria County, which is in Western Pennsylvania. And it's, Pennsylvania's a swing state. Cambria County is deep red, very working class. So I actually was able to go to the courthouse today because I'm in the county seat to figure out what's going on. I woke up to text messages from my friends who were trying to vote, and they were telling me that their ballots were not being counted in the machines. And they were being told to either leave their ballot there, like in the lockbox, or to go home. So I, kind of sprung into action to figure out what was going on and to figure out who to talk to. So at first, it was being reported by WJAC TV, which is our local news outlet, that the software, the voting machine software, was a problem. But then I went to the polls and I talked to poll workers there, and they were saying that they were being told that it was actually a problem with how the ballots were printed, and it wasn't a software issue. So that sparked even more questions in my mind. I was like, okay, then, I mean, who prints the ballots? Does the state print the ballots? Who designs the ballots? Who ensures that there's machine ballot compatibility? Like, there's all these questions come up, right? Of like, how could this happen that these machines would not be able to count the ballots on election day? Like, how does this happen? So I decided with my sister Amy, we went to the courthouse, which is another polling station, and I was told to talk to the Cambria County solicitor, who is kind of the number one person to answer questions on this issue. So I spoke to him. His name is Ron Repack. And I asked him
real quick, Julie, were the people there just like, oh, don't know? Like, did it seem just kind of like your average old poll worker that was confused?
It was chill. Like, people were just kind of like, yep, we're probably going to have to hand count the ballots later. We're going to be here till 10 p.m. because there was a court order to extend the voting day. So the polls normally close at 8, and the county asked to extend it when this issue came up. So now polls close at 10. So the poll workers that I spoke to were just kind of like, yep, we're probably going to be here till 10. We got to hand count the ballots. But they were like, kind of like, yeah, pretty crazy. But they were kind of chill. There was not a line. There was a line apparently right before we got there, they said. So, yeah, it was just like, they were kind of like, eh. And then I was asking questions about like what was happening, and they were like, we were told that it was an issue with the printed ballots and how they were printed. So that's when I was like, I need to go talk to somebody else about like how this could happen.
Okay, and then it's so weird. None of this happened, obviously, in early voting. All of a sudden today, something's off. Is it different?
Right. The solicitor told me that I voted early, and I was like, so what happened with, my ballot? He was like, all the mail-in ballots were fine. The machines took them and counted them. But this morning, literally at 7 a.m. on election day, it wasn't working. So my other question is, and I've reached out to the people who print the organization that prints the ballots and the software company that does the voting software. My question is like, why would the ballots be different if they're mail-in versus election day ballots? Like, why would there be an incompatibility with election day ballots and not with mail-in ballots? The Cambria County solicitor told me that there is like a number on the ballots that has to match in the voting software. I have the actual, yeah, it says they have a number, and I guess they had no issue with the mail-in ballots, and then at 7 a.m. they had an issue, and I said, do you test this prior? Because having an issue on election day seems like insane,
Right.
So he said there is a test, but you can't run the ballots that are actual ballots that are going to be processed because they all have like a number.
Because it's like a vote at that point.
And it's a vote, yeah. So if you run them through, it starts counting them. So, but then I'm wondering, like, I mean, there's so many questions still. Like, okay, so they do that test, but what about the people who do the voting software and who print the ballots? Like, do they test things? Like, what is the relationship between whoever designs the ballots and the voting software company, right?
Right.
So I reached out to them as well.
And
the printing company is William Penn Printing in Pittsburgh. The solicitor told me who was the printer and who does the voting software. The William Penn printer did not really want to speak to me. The only thing they told me is that they print the ballots, but they don't design the ballots. And then they wouldn't comment further or talk to me. And then I contacted Election Systems and Software, which is the machine operator. I asked them a number of questions. I asked them, how could it be that election day ballots are like incompatible and mail-in ballots aren't? I said, why would it not be compatible? What would be the problem here? How is the design of the paper ballots determined? Like, does ES&S design the paper ballots and say this is compatible with our software? Like, who's designing the ballots, right? And then I also asked if they test and if this is their responsibility or somebody else's. They ignored pretty much all my questions, and they were just like, people could still vote. They could put their ballot in the box, and it'll be hand counted at the end of the day. I was like, that's not what I asked.
Okay. So there was something about, you mentioned it just earlier, and Jack Posobiec mentioned there was an extension to 10 p.m. When did that come about?
So this morning, I believe the Cambria County Elections Board appealed to the state to ask for an extension, and they a judge granted it immediately, like as soon as they saw this problem. So then, I talked to the Cambria County solicitor. I think it was around like 2 p.m. He told me that they had printed new ballots that did work with the machines, and they had distributed them to 60% of the polling stations in the county. So people getting off work at 5 would have a working ballot. But there's all these ballots in lock boxes, right? So I'm like, okay, who has access to the lock boxes? And then who's going to count them, right? And he said, there are individuals at the polling stations that are designated at the precinct to access those ballot boxes, I think is what they're actually called. They're holding the paper ballots that haven't been scanned and counted. He said they're physically locked with a key, and certified election workers have the key. And I said, oh, is it one person per precinct or like multiple people? Like, who are the people that have the key and how are they chosen? He didn't know the answer to that. I'm sure there is some process, but I don't know what it is, and he didn't either. And then he said that certified election workers and sheriff's deputies will later take those ballots to the courthouse, and they're going to count them all in one place. So they will be transported, but they're tracked, and then they'll have poll watchers and the press and everybody. Not like the press won't be in the room where they're counting, but they can be in the courthouse. And see, he said they're trying to make it as transparent as possible. And this solicitor I talked to, he seemed trustworthy to me. He seemed baffled as to like how this happened. There are going to be ballots that are hand counted here in Pennsylvania. And I was also hearing, this is Cambria County, I was also hearing that other counties were experiencing issues like
that was my next question. Okay.
Yeah. And he said, I asked him like, okay, so do the same companies do the voting software and print the ballots in other counties? And he was like, I don't know. And so I have no information on what is going on in other counties. or if it's like the same sort of issue.
Okay. Are those the counties that you know of that are having issues, are they also deep red?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, deep red went for Trump last time. Definitely gonna go for Trump again, or I would imagine.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, super weird. And to be like rebuffed by I guess they're probably worried about negative press attention or like legal
Yes.
action. But they really wouldn't tell me anything about like how this could have happened. And my friend Dave, he was the first person to tell me about it. He's on Twitter. He took some videos, interviewed
Yes.
workers, and he took a photo of a machine that said like ballots counted 0, and
Right.
then like 3,000 had been like I think it was I'd have to pull up the exact photo, but it was showing that like none that 0 were counted. This was at, like 8 or 9 a.m. When people have already gone to vote. So his photo went viral, his video went viral, and people were suspect about what's going on in this county.
So for the rest of us in other states who are like, what's happening in Pennsylvania this evening? Are we going to be up super late because they're hand counting these geez, at so 10 p.m. your time, which is 9 hours, and 7 o'clock California time, West Coast time. I mean, this is obviously going to take late into the evening, even for just your county. But if they're all doing it, or not all, but if there's several doing this,
Right. Yeah, he told me that. He was like, "Yeah, we'll probably be counting till 1 a.m. now." Which is Eastern time.
hmm,
So people that, like in the past, you got election night results.
right? I mean,
And like ever since 2020, it's always been like weird delays and this and that. And like, um, it's not something that should happen. Like this shouldn't be a very complicated process, right?
yeah.
And
Well, I suppose in that, for those of us who have low patience that we need to work on, like myself, if it could be the thing. It's like most of Pennsylvania is counted. These are being hand counted here. These are all red counties. Let's make the assumption that they'll go for Trump. Something like that, I guess, is what we're going to be hearing at some point.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, yeah, that's the thing. I think that last time, and I haven't even had the bandwidth to look at what's going on in other counties because I've been trying to like figure out what's going on in this county, right?
Uh-huh.
So I have seen stuff come across my Twitter feed of like at least like weird stuff in Illinois. Like I don't know, stuff I haven't really been able to look into, but
Your
yeah,
friend Dave that took that video, he
yeah.
was there early. Were people leaving?
Um, that's a good question. I don't know. People were told to either leave and come back later, which is nuts because if you're like a blue collar worker,
Yes, of course.
you're going to come back. Like this is the other thing. It's insane that this isn't like a federal holiday, right? So that people are off work. Because I know people that work like blue collar jobs that like have to go after work or like
Yeah.
can't take off because they're hourly wage based workers that need that money. They're not salaried and the white collar professions where they get paid even if they're all, like not technically on the clock. So
Mm.
um yeah, so they were being told to either leave their ballot or if they weren't comfortable with that to come back later, which is nuts. And then a constable also told some folks at a polling station, and I heard this from my friend as well, a different friend, that if people hadn't voted by 10 but were still in line, they would have to turn them away. So
Mm.
that's when it closed. So like if the issue wasn't resolved. Now I did see a nun who's in my county. I just retweeted her. She tweeted that all the machines are back up and working.
Okay.
And I'd have to look at her tweet again to see what the source of her info was.
Uh-huh.
But according to her, the issue is resolved, someone that she spoke with. So, I mean, but that's like almost all day of these machines not working, right?
Right. Right. Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, yeah, I guess it's good if they're having none issues now. But
Good.
yeah, it sucks that they're doing that earlier. Do you feel that? Does it feel just in your environment out there and the stuff you do, working, of course, online with media and whatnot? Does it feel like, regardless of what's trying to happen with shenanigans or fuckery, if you will, that there's a lot of people with eyes on it this time? That it seems like that's not going to happen, or they're not going to let it happen.
It's a good question. I mean, like, count me among people who are really paying attention. Like last
Yeah.
time, I would not have been paying this close of attention.
Right.
And as soon as my friend texted, and same with my friend probably, and we're like, okay, like let's really get the story of what's going on. That's why I went to the courthouse and interviewed the solicitor because I was like, I can't, and like you can't trust the media to do the investigative reporting anymore. Like it's really like independent media, like what you're doing right here on this podcast, right? Independent alternative media that's going to actually like dig in and ask the questions. You can't really rely on the established institutions anymore. So I was like, I'm going to go and ask the questions. And who knows if any reporters have, contacted the printing company or the voting system software company, right? And those are the questions that need to be asked. And those are the, how does this happen? How do we make
Yes.
this not happen in the future, right? So and like Cambria County has, I think, 140,000, 170,000 residents. Like what if something like that happens in a much higher populated, area or whatever?
Yeah.
I mean,
It's a different sort of vote that's being displaced. If this happened in
yes.
Philly,
Yeah,
we'd hear about it from the media naturally. Uh,
exactly.
can you talk, speaking of media, can we talk about Google at all? Is that something you're willing to discuss, that some studies that came out?
Yeah, we can talk about Google. This was Google search. And Elon Musk was talking about some data that my company uh, came up with, well, analyzed, released uh, today. So that was an analysis. So we have 2,400 media bias ratings that Americans across the political spectrum contribute to. So we have people on the left, people in the center, people on the right. We have a panel of experts that's multi-partisan. And then we have everyday Americans. Anybody can sign up to help us rate the bias of media outlets and take our surveys.
Yes, I
So
did.
yeah. Oh, fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So we want to know what Americans think. What do Americans think of CNN and the New York Times and Newsmax and all these, right? And then that informs our bias ratings. We have a whole process and methodology. So we have all these bias ratings, and then we can apply those to different things to see the bias of different tech platforms. So in the past, in February, we released data on the bias of Google News. So we found that Google News was egregiously biased to the left when you when you just look at the Google News like homepage, so to speak. It's like news.google.com. You get mostly left-wing media that Americans rate as left-wing. By the way, this isn't just like me or just one
Right.
person saying that they're on the left. So that report went really viral. Elon Musk shared it. Tim Pool, JD Vance actually commented and was like, this was before he was the VP candidate. He was like, we need to break Google up. This is like not okay. This is a threat to democracy, right? So then we decided to look at Google search and Yahoo search and Bing search. So these are different platforms than Yahoo News, Bing News, and Google News. What is the search? If you search abortion news or election news, right? What sorts of results do you get? And we found that Google search is biased 68% to the left. So 68% of Google search results come from left-leaning or left-rated media outlets. And only it was, let's see, like 11% were from outlets we rate as lean right, or
Mhm.
sorry, right or lean right. So
Mhm.
teeny tiny amount. And there's like many reasons for this, right? Like obviously there's the conspiracies around it that like Google and these major search platforms are intentionally suppressing conservative voices. We don't look at that. We can't look at that. But there are things that Google criteria that Google says they use to determine what appears first in search when you Google like abortion news or something like that. And one of those things is site authoritativeness. And that's determined by things like how many links back to that site from other websites are there? What's the site like infrastructure and design? Like all of these things. So Google could be determining that these like lean left legacy media outlets have more like credibility and authority, and
Yeah.
it's surfacing those.
Right.
Now, whether or not that's fair is a matter of debate. At all sides, we don't think it's fair because we produce a balanced newsfeed and a balanced search. to help Americans get a broad view. Because if you're just getting one side, then you're never exposed to other perspectives or ideas. Like, then you're in a bubble. And are you really thinking for yourself? So that's kind of the gist of the data.
Okay. Well, they're still doing it. I just saw today there's a screenshot of places. It had something to do with polling places in certain locations, and the
Oh, yes.
can you what was
it was I didn't try it myself, but if you search for how to vote for Harris,
yes,
you get Google results that show you polling locations and how to find your polling location. If you Google how to search for Trump, you just get his campaign website.
yes,
So yeah, it's like, this is worth looking at, right? This is the world's top search engine. And
yes,
billions of people around the world rely on Google to get information. And think about if you're not like politically plugged in like me and you, right? And you're just like, what's going on? Like, is Biden too old to be president? I mean, that was relevant months ago, but like, and you Google that. That was the example that JD Vance gave. You Google, is Biden too old to be president? And you only get like, and that was back when the media was like, he's fine.
Yeah.
And then you only get that, that's going to like shape your perspective.
Yes.
Versus if you got 3 different perspectives on the issue, right? And then you can assess for yourself. So this is like my personal belief is that this is a form of mass manipulation to not present a balanced view through these tech platforms that are impacting elections. So
it's an info war.
It's like an info war.
Are you allowed to talk? You told me privately, and I'll couch this enough to not give it away if you can't talk about it. A certain a major news organization that came to you and it turned out, well, we rate you far left or left leaning, and they go, never mind, this is done, and they didn't want it finished. Are you allowed to talk about that or no?
Yeah, well, I can say some things. Like, we do bias audits of newsrooms. So they come to us and they say, we don't want to be biased. Can you audit us for bias? Like, where do we fall on the political spectrum? So I will oversee audits of news content where I get people, again, on the left, center, and right. It's always multi-partisan. It's always Americans across the political spectrum to analyze news content for bias. And then we also poll everyday Americans. So like the surveys you signed up for. So it's a panel of experts trained to see bias, and then everyday Americans. And we did have one of the top newsrooms come to us and say, and there was their business side. They said, we think we have a problem with bias. Can you help? And I said, absolutely. We have all this data on how Americans see you. They tend to see you as leaning left. Like, let me show you the data. And then they ended up shutting down the project in a pretty forceful way and not wanting to speak with us anymore. On the plus side, there are newsrooms that have worked with us and done the bias audits and care about their bias. Newsweek is one of them.
Yes.
Yes, Newsweek. You can go to our website and see the results of that audit. There's a new news site called Straight Arrow News that's like super balanced, and they do a really good job, and they're like balance certified by us. It's like a narrower criteria of being balanced and unbiased. So they're quite good. And then the other one is Spectrum News. And they've been doing bias audits with us for like 2 years, and they really care about being fair. And they, we send them long reports of what people on the left, center, and right think of their reporting, and they're like really focused on this. They have a local news across the country, including in Austin, around where you are.
Yes.
Not Pittsburgh, not where I am, but New York, Houston, LA, like all over the place. So,
and then real quick before we get out of here, I've got over here on my office wall the All Sides Media bias chart that you created. Hanging, and there's a new version of it out, and then you and I spoke about it, and there was even a newer one than I had posted a photo of. What were the changes within like the news organizations that we would know, whether they be center, did they move left? What were the changes?
Well, one of the funny ones is that Reason magazine moved from lean right to center, and they're a super weird one that we talk about all the time, where we're like, they don't really fit our like left right spectrum, right? Because like from my perspective, they're on the left.
Same.
Because I'm conservative. And so to me, if you're like, oh, like legalized sex work, I'm like, you're on the left, right? But they are like economically like free market, all that. So that's kind of more on the right, maybe more like or is that, I don't know if you'd say that's more like less populist right, but more like neocon right. So like, and they're like for open borders, which is more left. So they're weird. So they did end up in the center. And that was a big change. And then we added a bunch of outlets to the chart. So we added the Free Press, that's Barry Weiss's organization. There are honestly another one that's a bit hard to rate. They're very like pro-Israel, but also like against like woke stuff. So whether that's left or right is like, we'll see. We have them as, I think, lean right now.
She's like a female Ben Shapiro now or something, pro-Israel, anti-woke.
They're very like pro free speech and anti-cancel culture and all these things.
Unless you come after a certain country.
Yeah, so very pro-Israel content for sure. Mm-hmm. So we added them. We added a couple other media outlets that now I would have to look at. Let me see. We added Just the News. They're on the right. We added Zero Hedge. They're on the right. And then I think a couple other ones. So there's some new outlets on there, and Straight Arrow News, which is the one that's super in the middle.
On the middle, okay.
Yeah. So yeah. So and then we released that before the election because we're like, wherever you're getting your election news from, even all this stuff going on in Pennsylvania, it's like, who's going to be reporting on this? The New York Post reported on it.
We are.
Yeah, but now I have to go look and see who else reported on it, and if it was covered widely. Like, did NBC report on it? Like, I don't know. New York Post also interviewed the guy that I interviewed, the county solicitor. So
okay,
yeah.
Well, cool. Is there anything in closing you need to throw out there that we haven't discussed yet, or final thoughts on what you learned or what's happening there? Any of the sort?
No, I don't think so. I just think it's been kind of crazy to me to see how effective Twitter is at like spreading information, because like Amy tweeted about this this morning and it has like 3 million views, right? And it's like
Elon responded to her.
Elon Musk responded to her, yeah, and he tweeted out the Google bias data this morning. So it's like there's stuff that's important that just like you're not going to get from the legacy media. This sort of like alternative, like citizen journalism stuff is super important, I think. And to me, that's like a big white pill. So
yeah. I suspect within the next 4 years that a lot of the legacy media as we know it is probably done. So it should be interesting to watch this.
It's crazy. Yeah. I think what's the last holdout of the legacy media is like the boomers, unless they were to like implement these bias audits, really change course. CNN's been trying. They did a better job on the debates than ABC, right?
Sure.
So like they're trying. So
yeah, they're trying. It should be interesting. I think we've talked about this too. I think Elon through X, he should have some division that has their media bias rating and hires legit people, because everyone's going to go, well, that's Elon Musk, it's going to be right wing. But I do think if he hired a legitimate staff to do it honestly, it would be very helpful.
Yeah, just the way that we do it, right? And he actually tweeted, he's commented on the bias chart before. We did a fact check bias chart that he commented on as well, where it's like a bias ratings of fact checkers. But he tweeted like 2 years ago, I have the tweet saved. He said, if a media outlet is biased but claims to be neutral, they should be labeled. And I was like, that's exactly what we do.
That's it.
And you could implement that on Twitter. You could have a news feed that's left, center, right news. You could put it in the feed. If somebody shares a link, you have their bias rating, right? And I think as long as those bias ratings are like, like the way we do it, like people are contributing from across the spectrum, like then it's okay. That's what Americans think. So
yeah, it's akin to the congressman should have like a NASCAR jacket with every lobbyist in country that sponsors them pasted all over their coat. So at least we know what's going on here.
Well, we know, just so we know where you're leaning. Yeah, I think it's great. So,
all right. Anything to plug before we get out?
If people want to follow me on Twitter, I am at Julie Wrights.
Excellent. Cool. Julie, thank you for doing this. And thank you guys for tuning in. We got over 100 there, and it was at the last spur of the moment. So I appreciate you guys. As you know, if you are a regular watcher of Counterflow, well, I kind of gave you an episode. I said no episode today on election day, election night, because too much is going on. And there was so much going on that we did a live stream. So you got one. Next week, next Tuesday, Justin Marler is back on the show. So that's going to be awesome. Until then, have fun tonight. Have fun, you guys. We'll talk soon.